The colony planet, Arvion 6, was unlike any other place Mara Elson had ever seen. The sky was painted in shades of deep purple and gold, casting an eternal twilight across the rocky plains. Shadows stretched and warped in strange directions, creating illusions that played tricks on the eyes. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also unsettling. Mara pulled her jacket tighter as the cold wind swept across the observation platform. Even in her insulated uniform, the chill bit through her sleeves. Mara had been assigned to the research outpost only a week ago, yet the planet already felt alive, as if it were watching her every move. She glanced at the cluster of domed habitats in the distance, their lights flickering faintly in the dim glow of the twin suns setting on the horizon. Scientists and engineers scurried between buildings, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, about the strange sensations that Mara could feel pressing at the edge of her mind. She adjusted her comlink and spoke to the outpost commander, Captain Rellan. "Captain, I'm at the northern perimeter. All sensors look normal so far. The magnetic readings are within expected range," she reported. "Copy that, Lieutenant," Rellan replied, his voice steady and calm. "Remember, Mara, don't let the shadows play tricks on you. Focus on the data, not the stories." Mara smiled faintly. "Understood." As she continued her walk along the edge of the plateau, she noticed a figure standing near the observation tower. Dr. Elias Trent, one of the senior researchers, was known for his calm and precise nature, but something about his posture froze her in place. He stood absolutely still, feet planted firmly, arms at his sides, staring at the horizon as though he were waiting for something. At first, she thought he might be meditating or lost in thought, but then she noticed it. The shadow beneath him shifted. Slowly, deliberately, it moved a fraction of a step forward, while Elias himself did not. Mara's heart skipped a beat. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. Shadows could be strange on Arvion 6, stretching in the twilight, twisting under the influence of the magnetic storms. But this was different. This was impossible. Mara called out, "Dr. Trent?" Her voice echoed softly across the plateau, swallowed by the low hum of the wind. No response. She took a cautious step forward, then another. The shadow moved again, just slightly, almost testing her reaction. "Elias!" she shouted, louder this time. Still no movement, still no response, only the shadow inching forward as if it had a will of its own. Mara's mind raced. Was it a trick of the light, some strange magnetic interference? She had seen the reports of odd energy readings near the magnetic poles, but nothing in the data suggested that human shadows could move independently. Her comlink beeped. "Lieutenant Elson," Captain Rellan said. "Status report. Are you observing an anomaly?" Mara hesitated, then replied, "Yes, sir, but it's hard to explain. Dr. Trent, his shadow, it moved, but he didn't. He's standing completely still. Yet the shadow is not aligned with his body." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you certain, Lieutenant? You've only been here a week. It could be a visual illusion. Twilight shadows are known to mislead the eye." "I'm certain." "Sir," Mara insisted, "I'll record it on my camera. You'll see for yourself. Proceed carefully. Do not approach him too closely. Maintain a safe distance." Mara nodded to herself and pulled out her handheld recording device. She aimed it at Elias and pressed record. For several minutes, nothing happened. The shadow seemed frozen, perfectly aligned with the scientist. Then, in the corner of her view, she saw it shift again, one small step forward. Her breath caught in her throat. She could not explain it. Suddenly, the wind picked up, carrying a faint humming sound, almost like a whisper, around the platform. Mara froze. The hairs on her arms stood up. Something about this place made her feel tiny, insignificant. as if the planet itself was alive and aware of her presence. The shadow shifted once more, and this time, it was unmistakable. It moved sideways, sliding along the ground like liquid, while Elias remained absolutely still. Mara's fingers trembled as she aimed her camera closer. Then, as if sensing her attention, the shadow snapped back into place, perfectly mirroring Elias's still body. Mara's heart pounded. She backed away slowly, trying to make sense of what she had just witnessed. The sky darkened slightly as the twin suns dipped behind the jagged peaks. Shadows lengthened across the plateau, stretching into grotesque shapes that seemed to crawl over the ground. Mara felt a wave of unease. She had been trained for dangerous missions, for hazardous planets and hostile terrain. But nothing could have prepared her for this. Finally, Elias turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence. "Lieutenant Elson?" His voice was calm, familiar, completely normal. Mara blinked, relieved, but also confused. "Are you all right, sir?" He smiled faintly. "I'm fine, just observing the horizon." Mara lowered her camera but kept her eyes fixed on him. "Your shadow, it moved," she said carefully. Elias tilted his head. "What do you mean?" It didn't match your movements. It shifted on its own." Mara hesitated, unsure how to explain it without sounding mad. "I saw it clearly." Elias's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a look of mild concern. "Perhaps the light plays tricks. Twilight can be deceptive here. The planet, it's strange. I've noticed odd reflections myself." Mara shook her head. "No, this was different. It wasn't a reflection. It was alive, almost. It moved as if it had a mind of its own." Elias considered her words but did not respond further. He turned back to the horizon, and Mara noticed that his shadow now aligned perfectly. Her mind could not stop racing. Something was happening here, something beyond her understanding. She returned to the outpost later that evening, her camera filled with footage of the impossible. She replayed the moments, watching the shadow inch forward, while the man above it remained frozen. Each playback confirmed what she had seen. Captain Relin listened to her report in silence. "Lieutenant, it's possible that the planetary energy fields are affecting perception. But if your footage proves otherwise..." His voice trailed off. "We may be dealing with phenomena that no human has studied before." Mara nodded. That was exactly what she had feared. She could feel it in her bones. This planet was not merely a collection of rocks and air. It had a consciousness, a presence, a life form that did not exist in any database or research log. And somehow, Dr. Trent had become its instrument. As night fell, Mara could not sleep. She stared out of the observation window at the plateau, at the tower where Elias had stood. Shadows stretched across the rocks like dark rivers, twisting and turning under the faint light of the distant suns. Every flicker, every stretch of darkness seemed purposeful, as if something unseen was testing her, watching her. She realized she was no longer just a visitor on Arvian 6. She was a witness to something extraordinary. Something that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics, life, and consciousness. And somewhere in the darkness, a shadow waited. Mara woke before dawn. The pale light of Arvion 6's twin suns barely pierced the domed windows of the outpost, casting long, strange shadows across the lab floor. Her mind could not rest. The memory of Elias's shadow moving on its own haunted her like a stubborn echo. She knew she had to understand it before it was too late. She pulled on her jacket and boots, slipping silently through the quiet corridors. Most of the researchers were still asleep. Only the hum of life support systems and the occasional flicker of lights in distant rooms broke the silence. Mara carried her handheld camera and a portable energy scanner, determined to catch the anomaly herself. Reaching the observation tower, she found Elias already there, gazing at the horizon again. His posture was calm, relaxed, unaware, or perhaps pretending to be unaware, of the shadow she had seen move. Mara hesitated, unsure how to approach him without sounding accusatory. "Good morning, Dr. Trent," she said lightly. He turned, smiling faintly. "Lieutenant, you're early." "I couldn't sleep," Mara admitted. I wanted to make sure everything's okay with the perimeter sensors." Elias nodded. "That's responsible of you." Mara didn't respond. She wanted to ask about the shadow, but something in his calm demeanor made her pause. Instead, she set up her camera on a small tripod and aimed it at him. "Just some routine monitoring," she said, trying to sound casual. Elias raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. He returned to staring at the horizon. Mara activated her scanner. The device hummed softly, displaying fluctuating energy readings across the plateau. The readings were normal at first, but then she noticed something unusual. Small, rhythmic pulses near Elias. She frowned. They were weak, subtle, almost like whispers of energy. She adjusted the scanner, focusing on the area around his shadow. The pulses became clearer. The shadow seemed to have a presence of its own. Tiny, imperceptible fluctuations that the scanner detected. Mara's heart raced. It was exactly what she had feared. The shadow wasn't just a trick of the light. Suddenly, the shadow moved. Slowly, almost cautiously, it stretched forward as if testing her reaction. Mara's hands shook as she recorded it, knowing she could not be imagining it. This was real. Something intelligent, was interacting with Elias's shadow. "Lieutenant Elson?" Elias's calm voice startled her. She turned quickly, expecting him to notice, but his expression remained neutral, almost serene. I need to analyze this," she stammered, pointing to her scanner. There's something unusual about your shadow." Elias tilted his head. "You think there's something wrong with me?" "No, I mean, the phenomenon isn't physical. It's like the shadow has a mind of its own." Mara struggled to explain, but the words felt inadequate. Elias's smile faded slightly. "Arvion 6 is full of anomalies. We've all seen odd things here. But you sound serious." "I am serious," Mara said firmly. "I'm going to record everything tonight. I need to know what's happening." Elias nodded slowly, as if accepting her decision. Mara felt a small sense of relief, but also a growing tension. Whatever this was, it was not something she could face casually. That night, Mara set up multiple cameras around the observation tower, pointing from different angles. She also attached motion sensors and energy detectors to track fluctuations near Elias's shadow. Hours passed in silence. The twin moons rose, casting silver light over the rocky plains. The shadows stretched longer, darker, alive. At first, nothing happened. Mara watched the monitors, her eyes strained and her mind alert. Then, in the corner of one camera's feed, she saw it. The shadow twisted, stretching sideways, folding in ways that defied physics. It moved deliberately, almost cautiously, as if aware of her observation. Mara's pulse quickened. She ran her fingers over the scanner controls, noting the energy readings spiking as the shadow shifted. The pulses were stronger than before, rhythmic, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. She whispered to herself, "It's alive." Hours passed, and she documented every motion, every fluctuation. She replayed the footage, frame by frame. Each time the shadow moved with intention. It did not mimic Elias. It seemed independent. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. Mara froze. The sound was faint but distinct, vibrating in her chest. She realized it was not coming from her equipment. It was coming from the plateau itself. The magnetic energy in the air had intensified. The scanners picked up massive spikes. Mara stepped back, watching as Elias's shadow stretched higher, then contracted, twisting unnaturally. "Dr. Trent!" she called, heart pounding. "Step away from the tower!" He turned slowly, his calm expression unchanging. "Lieutenant, I don't feel anything unusual." Mara grabbed his arm, but before she could pull him away, a sudden surge of energy radiated from the shadow. The cameras flickered, and the room was filled with blinding light. Mara stumbled backward, shielding her eyes. She could feel a presence, powerful, intelligent, ancient. It filled her mind with images she could barely understand. Shapes, patterns, motions, knowledge that was not human. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The light vanished, leaving the room in the quiet silver glow of the moons. Mara's heart raced and she looked around. Elias was still standing perfectly still, his shadow now aligned with him normally. "Lieutenant, are you all right?" he asked calmly. Mara's hands trembled as she held up the scanner. The energy readings had normalized. It was something," she whispered. "Your shadow, it moved. It did things I can't explain." Elias nodded slowly, studying her. "I trust your judgment, Mara. But you must understand, not all things on Arvion 6 obey human logic. Sometimes, perception is the only evidence we have." Mara shook her head. "No, this wasn't just perception. It was deliberate, intelligent." Elias's expression softened. "Then we must be careful. Whatever you encountered, it may not be hostile, but it is not human either. Curiosity can be dangerous here." Mara left the tower that night, carrying her equipment back to the outpost. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be an alien life form? Some kind of energy-based intelligence? Or perhaps an experiment conducted by previous explorers, left behind in the shadows? The thought made her shiver. Over the next few days, she dedicated herself to analyzing the data. She cross-referenced the energy pulses with the planet's magnetic field fluctuations. Patterns emerged, subtle, almost invisible to the human eye. The shadow moved most during periods of peak magnetic activity, but the connection was not perfect. It was intelligent, yes, but it was not bound solely to natural phenomena. Mara also reviewed the colony logs, searching for previous incidents. Reports of strange occurrences, dismissed as hallucinations or visual illusions, were scattered across the last decade. Shadows shifting independently, whispers in the wind, unexplained energy surges. She realized that whatever she had encountered was not new, but it had been ignored, forgotten, or misunderstood. One evening, as she studied the footage, Mara noticed something chilling. The shadow seemed to respond to her presence. Every time she focused on it, it moved differently, curious, testing her reactions. It was learning. And she realized, with a sudden cold certainty, that the shadow could be observing more than just Elias. It could be observing her. The realization made her stomach tighten. This was no longer a scientific anomaly to record and study. It was something sentient, something aware, and it had noticed her. Mara knew she had to act. If the entity controlling the shadow grew too curious or too bold, it might take actions she could not predict. She began preparing strategies, light patterns, energy pulses, ways to communicate without exposing herself to danger. Every precaution mattered. The nights on Arvion 6 grew longer, shadows stretching like living fingers across the outpost. Mara could feel them creeping along walls, under doors, across floors. Sometimes she thought she saw movement from the corner of her eye, a flicker, a stretch, a distortion. But when she turned, nothing was there. And yet, she knew it was watching. It was learning. And Mara had no choice but to continue observing it, recording every anomaly, trying to understand it before it understood her, and perhaps decided she was part of its study. The planet was alive. The shadows were alive. and somewhere in the darkness, intelligence waited. Mara clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "I will understand you, no matter what it takes." She had crossed the threshold into the unknown, and there was no turning back. The nights on Arvion 6 had grown longer and darker. Mara could feel the weight of the planet pressing in on her, as if the twilight itself was alive. The strange magnetic hum had become a constant presence, rising and falling like the breath of something enormous, unseen, and intelligent. The shadow anomaly had not appeared in full again, but its energy pulses still flickered in the readings, teasing her with signs of awareness. Mara could no longer ignore it. She had spent days documenting the phenomenon, analyzing every subtle movement, and yet she understood almost nothing. The shadows were not merely reflections of light. They were controlled, deliberate, alive in a way that defied science. Determined to confront it directly, Mara set up her observation equipment at the northern plateau, where the magnetic activity was strongest. She carried multiple cameras, motion sensors, and a portable energy scanner. Tonight, she would face the anomaly head-on. The wind blew cold across the rocks, carrying whispers that sounded almost like voices. Mara tightened her jacket and activated the cameras, aiming at the observation tower where Dr. Elias Trent often stood. She had expected him to appear, yet the platform was empty. A faint glow emanated from the horizon, casting long, twisting shadows that moved unnaturally. Then, she saw him. Elias stood at the edge of the plateau, his posture rigid and calm. Mara's heart skipped a beat. The shadow beneath him stretched unnaturally, flickering like a liquid ribbon. And then, he didn't move. Not a muscle. Yet the shadow began to detach, curling and twisting independently, as if it were testing the air around it. Mara swallowed hard. She stepped closer, holding her scanner steady. The readings spiked. The energy pulses were strong, coherent, almost intelligent. Her pulse quickened. "Dr. Trent," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He remained still, eyes fixed on the horizon. Then, slowly, the shadow began to rise. It elongated, growing taller and darker, folding in on itself like a living ribbon of darkness. Mara gasped. It was no longer just a shadow. It seemed to have mass, density, presence. She could feel it in her chest, a strange weight pressing against her senses. The shadow shifted toward her, and Mara froze. It didn't walk like a human. It didn't slither like a snake. It moved as if it were liquid yet conscious, each motion precise, deliberate. The scanner in her hands beeped rapidly, recording surges of energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Mara's mind raced. This was not a simple anomaly. This was intelligence. Something far older, far wiser than any human mind could comprehend. And it was reaching for her. Suddenly, a voice echoed in her mind, not in words, but in understanding. It was strange, alien, yet she somehow comprehended it. "Do not fear. Observe." Mara staggered back, blinking. The shadow had not spoken aloud, yet the message was clear. Her training had prepared her for danger, for physical threats, but nothing had prepared her for a mind that communicated through perception itself. The shadow twisted again, forming shapes she could not describe, geometric patterns, spirals, and waves, all pulsing with intelligence. She realized it was not just reaching toward her, it was observing her, studying her reactions. Mara's courage hardened. She activated a series of light pulses from her scanner, patterns she had prepared for observation. Each pulse illuminated the shadow in sharp relief. The patterns flickered across its surface, and the shadow responded, twisting in rhythm, matching her signals. A surge of awe and fear hit her. It was communicating. She was not just witnessing it. She was interacting with it. The wind shifted, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone from the magnetic surges. Mara realized that the energy spikes were not random. They were part of the entity's awareness, part of its method of interacting with the physical world. She raised her scanner, projecting new patterns of light and motion. The shadow responded with increasing complexity, folding and unfolding as if performing a language of movement. Mara realized, with a shiver of both fear and excitement, that this was the first direct communication between humans and an intelligence unlike anything the universe had documented. Then, the shadow pulsed violently, and a ripple of energy knocked Mara backward. She hit the ground hard, groaning. Her vision blurred. When she opened her eyes, Elias was still standing perfectly still, calm and unaffected. Yet the shadow was normal again, aligned with him, motionless. Mara's chest heaved. The readings on her scanner were off the charts. Energy surges she had never seen before. She realized the entity had tested her, gauged her reaction, then withdrawn. "Lieutenant," Elias's voice was calm, measured. "Are you unharmed?" I think so," Mara said, struggling to her feet. It's intelligent, alive, and it just tested me." Elias nodded. "I sensed it. But why involve you?" Mara shook her head. "I don't know, but it's learning. It's observing us, me. I think it wanted to know how I would respond." Elias's calm demeanor did not waver. "Then you are part of its study." He spoke slowly, carefully, as though the words themselves carried weight. Arvion 6 is older than we realize. The planet itself may host consciousness, energy-based, non-physical. We are not dealing with matter alone. You must understand that, Mara." Mara shivered, staring at the horizon where the shadow had danced. She had felt its presence inside her mind, probing, examining. She realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that humans were not alone here, and perhaps had never been. "I need to study it more," she said, voice firm. "I need to understand it before it understands everything about us." Elias studied her, eyes thoughtful. "Be careful. Curiosity can be dangerous. We may not survive the encounter if it decides to test us fully." Mara nodded, already thinking of ways to strengthen her observations, to record every subtle fluctuation, every pulse of energy. She would not allow fear to stop her. Knowledge, she knew, was humanity's greatest weapon. Over the next few nights, Mara repeated her experiments. She used combinations of light, sound, and motion, testing the shadow's reactions. Each time the entity responded, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. She realized that it could anticipate movement, respond to intention, and even mimic her signals, but always with its own twist, showing awareness beyond mimicry. During one session, the shadow pulsed, and Mara felt a strange sensation in her mind, a fleeting sense of memory that was not hers. She saw glimpses of alien landscapes, towering structures of light, and flowing currents of energy that defied physics. The impression lasted only seconds, but left her breathless. This entity was ancient, powerful, and intelligent. She could not stop thinking about it. She realized that Elias himself was part of the mystery. Was the shadow linked only to him? Was he a conduit, or merely the observer the entity chose to study? She had no answers, but she knew she had to find out. One night, she decided to confront it differently. She approached Elias, holding the scanner high and projecting a sequence of intricate light patterns across the plateau. The shadow emerged again, twisting and curling, its movements fluid and deliberate. Mara stepped forward, heart pounding, projecting pulses in a rhythm she hoped it could understand. The shadow halted, freezing in mid-motion. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, it reached outward. Not toward Mara, not toward Elias, but into the space between them, forming shapes that pulsed with understanding. Mara realized that it was offering her a choice: approach, communicate, risk understanding, or retreat and remain ignorant. Fear clashed with curiosity, and she took a deep breath. She would not run, she would learn. And in that instant, she understood the first truth about Arvion 6. This planet, this entity, was testing humans. But not to destroy them. It sought to understand them, as they sought to understand it. Mara's pulse quickened. The shadow twisted again, and she mirrored its movements with light, creating a rhythm that was shared between human and entity. For the first time, she felt a connection, a fragile bridge between intelligence that had never met before. It was thrilling. It was terrifying. And it was only the beginning. The days that followed Mara's first direct encounter with the shadow were filled with restless research. The outpost was quiet, yet the air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. Every flicker of light, every distortion in a shadow, made Mara tense. She spent hours analyzing footage from multiple cameras, reviewing energy readings, and running simulations of the shadow's movement patterns. It became clear to her, the shadow was not random. It had intelligence, memory, and curiosity. Each time she approached, each time she tested it with light and motion, it learned. It adapted. It responded in ways that suggested planning, comprehension, even a kind of judgment. But there was still one question that haunted her. Why Elias? Why was his shadow the one that moved independently? Determined to find answers, Mara approached him cautiously one morning in the observation lab. "Dr. Trent," she began, her voice steady but careful, "I need to ask you something. Has anything unusual ever happened to you on Arvion 6? Anything you didn't report?" Elias looked at her with calm, unreadable eyes. For a moment, he did not answer. Then he spoke softly. "Lieutenant, there are things about this planet I cannot explain fully. We've observed anomalies for decades. Some were dismissed, some never documented. The truth is, the shadows are not just reflections of light. They are part of the planet's consciousness." Mara's eyes widened. "Consciousness?" she whispered. "You mean alive?" "Yes," Elias said slowly. "But not alive in a human sense. Arvion 6 is home to a non-corporeal intelligence. It observes, interacts, learns. The shadow you saw, it is a projection of that intelligence linked to me, or perhaps choosing me as a conduit for communication. I don't fully understand why, but it is as if part of the entity resides in my presence." Mara felt a chill. "So all this time, it has been studying us?" "Yes, carefully, patiently. It does not harm us, at least not intentionally. It seeks understanding, and it has chosen you now as well, Mara. You are being observed too." The revelation was overwhelming. Mara's mind raced. She had felt the entity's presence, sensed its intelligence, but she had never imagined it could be connected so directly to a human. And now she realized something deeper. The planet itself, its energy, its magnetic fields, were the medium through which this intelligence expressed itself. That night, Mara returned to the plateau. She carried her scanners, cameras, and a small device designed to map energy patterns in 3 dimensions. She needed to witness it directly to understand the full scope of what she was dealing with. Elias accompanied her, his calm presence grounding her as they approached the observation tower. "Remember," he said quietly, "approach with caution, but do not fear. Fear will only close your mind. Curiosity, observation, that is what it seeks." The shadow appeared shortly after they reached the plateau. It was larger now, stretching taller, more complex. Its movements were fluid, almost artistic, folding in on itself in spirals and arcs. Mara felt the energy pulses through her body, resonating with her own heartbeat. She projected a series of light patterns using her scanner, carefully timed to mirror the pulses of energy from the shadow. The entity responded instantly, bending, twisting, and forming shapes that seemed to communicate back. Mara realized with a shiver it was using a form of abstract language. Movement, light, energy, these were its words. Elias remained still, watching silently. Mara noticed that the shadow occasionally flickered in his direction, as if acknowledging his presence. Then, almost imperceptibly, a tendril of dark energy reached toward him, curling lightly around his form. Elias did not react, but Mara felt a subtle tension in the air, a quiet acknowledgement between human and entity. This is incredible, Mara whispered. It's trying to communicate. It's teaching us something. Elias nodded. Or learning from us. It is a two-way process. We observe. It observes. We act. It reacts. This is how intelligence grows. We are witnessing evolution in real time, but not of flesh and bone, of consciousness. Mara's mind raced with possibilities. If the entity could manipulate energy so precisely, if it could interact with humans through shadows, then its potential was unimaginable. It could study minds, observe behavior, perhaps even influence thought. Yet there was no malice in its actions, only curiosity, an insatiable drive to understand. She adjusted her scanner, projecting new light sequences that mimicked complex gestures she had recorded earlier. The shadow responded immediately, folding in ways Mara had never seen before. Patterns emerged, repeating and evolving, almost like sentences in a language she did not yet comprehend. Hours passed, and Mara became lost in the process of observation. She realized she was no longer just a scientist documenting anomalies. She was a participant in the interaction. The shadow was aware of her presence, gauging her reactions, learning from her movements, adapting its responses. Finally, the shadow pulsed once, intensely, then receded, folding back into Elias's form. It no longer moved independently, aligning perfectly with him as if nothing had occurred. Mara exhaled, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had witnessed. "Do you understand now?" Elias asked quietly. "This is why the shadow moved through me. I am a conduit, a bridge between your world and the consciousness of Arvion 6. It uses me to interact physically, to test reactions safely, to measure responses. You must understand that what you saw is not just a trick of light or energy, it is life. Life that exists beyond matter, beyond our comprehension." Mara nodded, swallowing hard. "So, it isn't hostile. It just observes and learns and tests us." "Yes," Elias said. "And that is why we must be careful. Curiosity is powerful, but too much provocation could be dangerous. We are entering uncharted territory. This intelligence is far older, far wiser than us. But it is not evil. It seeks knowledge, like we do." Mara felt a sense of awe she could not shake. Humanity often imagined itself at the center of intelligence in the universe. Here, on this remote planet, she realized how small, how limited that view had been. And yet, she also understood something vital. Humans were capable of observation, reasoning, and adaptation. Even in the presence of such vast intelligence, they could act wisely. She turned her attention back to Elias. "We need to record everything, every pulse, every movement. If it interacts with us again, we need to understand it completely." Elias agreed. "Yes. But remember, observation is not just recording. It is also understanding context, anticipating behavior, and respecting boundaries. We must approach it with patience and humility." Over the next days, Mara expanded her research. She mapped energy pulses across the plateau, correlated shadow movements with magnetic activity, and refined her light patterns to communicate more effectively. Slowly, patterns emerged. The entity responded consistently to certain sequences, indicating recognition and understanding. She realized she could establish a rudimentary form of dialogue, not with words, but with motion and energy. One evening, as Mara observed the plateau from a safe distance, she noticed something extraordinary. The shadow began to pulse in a pattern she had not used. It formed shapes, spirals, and arcs that seemed deliberate. Mara projected her scanner's light in response, carefully mimicking the sequence. The shadow responded instantly, folding and stretching in harmony with her signals. A sense of wonder filled her. The entity was initiating communication on its own. It was not merely reacting, it was teaching her, guiding her understanding. Mara realized the significance. Humans were no longer just observers. They were participants in a dialogue with consciousness far beyond their comprehension. Elias joined her silently, watching. "Do you see?" he said softly. "It is sharing knowledge, not in words but in understanding, and it has chosen to share it with you." Mara's heart raced. She felt a thrill of excitement tempered by caution. This was unprecedented. She was witnessing intelligence evolve in real time, interacting with humans through shadows, light, and energy. The implications for humanity, for science, were beyond anything she could imagine. And yet, she also understood the danger. This intelligence was vast, powerful, and ancient. One wrong move, one misstep, could have consequences they could not predict. She had to be careful, patient, and observant. As the twin moons of Arvion 6 rose in the sky, casting silver light over the rocky plains, Mara stood silently, watching the shadows twist and pulse. She understood now what she had glimpsed. The entity was not a threat. It was not human, but it was alive, aware, and curious. And for the first time, she felt that humanity, through observation, courage, and reasoning, could reach across the gap and make contact with something truly extraordinary. Mara turned to Elias, her voice firm with determination. "We will learn from it. We will understand it. And we will make sure humanity is ready for what comes next." Elias nodded, his calm gaze reflecting the silver light. "Yes, Mara. And perhaps, in the process, we will learn something about ourselves as well." The plateau was quiet once more, but the energy pulses continued, subtle and deliberate, a heartbeat of consciousness flowing across the land. Mara knew this was only the beginning. The shadows of Arvion 6 were alive, and they had chosen to reveal themselves. Mara awoke before dawn once again, her mind restless and full of questions. The memory of the shadow, the pulses of energy, and the silent communication from the entity haunted her. For days, she and Elias had observed, tested, and tried to understand it. Each night had brought new revelations, but now Mara knew the time had come for a different approach. Observation was no longer enough. The entity was aware of her. It had tested her, taught her patterns, even guided her understanding. And now she felt a strange pressure, a silent invitation. It wanted more than observation. It wanted interaction. She prepared carefully, carrying her scanners, cameras, and the light projector she had developed to communicate with the entity. Elias followed silently, his calm presence steadying her nerves. "Are you certain about this?" he asked, his voice low and serious. Mara nodded. "We've learned enough to take the next step. It's trying to reach out. We have to respond." Elias studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But remember, Mara, approach with respect. It is powerful and ancient. Do not act impulsively." They reached the northern plateau, just as the first pale light of the twin suns crept over the horizon. The air was charged, humming with energy. Shadows stretched long and twisted, and Mara felt the familiar pressure of the entity's awareness. And then she saw it. The shadow detached from Elias first, stretching and curling in ways Mara had not yet seen. It moved fluidly, almost like smoke caught in a gentle breeze. But this time it approached her directly. Mara's heart pounded, and a shiver ran down her spine. She raised her projector and began the sequence of light and motion she had practiced. The shadow responded immediately, folding and twisting in harmony with her signals. Energy pulsed around her, vibrating through the ground, through her body. Mara realized that this was more than communication. It was an exchange of understanding, a dialogue without words. The shadow paused, then pulsed brightly, sending waves of energy that Mara could feel in her mind. Images formed, vast landscapes of light, currents of energy flowing like rivers, shapes of intelligence that existed beyond matter. The entity was sharing knowledge, its perceptions of the universe, the rhythm of its consciousness. Mara exhaled slowly, overwhelmed. She realized the enormity of the moment. Humans were no longer alone in their understanding of life. They were engaging with intelligence beyond flesh, beyond time, beyond comprehension. Suddenly, the shadow coalesced into a shape that mimicked Elias. It was both him and not him, a perfect projection of human form made of darkness and light. Mara's breath caught. The entity was showing her the link between itself and Elias. "You see now," Elias said quietly. "Part of it resides through me. It uses me to interact physically with the environment. I am a bridge." Mara nodded, absorbing the enormity of his words. "And you're aware of it all this time?" "Yes," Elias replied. "I have sensed it, studied it, and guided its interactions carefully. But it is learning from you now, Mara. It seeks understanding, and it wants to know us. It is not hostile. It is curious." Mara took a deep breath. "Then we must respond wisely. We must show it who we are, our intelligence, our reasoning, our curiosity, but also our respect." The shadow pulsed again, moving in intricate patterns, almost like it was waiting for her to act. Mara raised her projector and began a new sequence, combining light, motion, and energy patterns she had never tried before. The shadow mirrored her movements perfectly, then added variations, suggesting ideas and responses she had not anticipated. Hours passed in this silent exchange. Mara felt a strange exhilaration, a mixture of fear, awe, and triumph. She realized that this was more than science. It was diplomacy, understanding, and first contact rolled into one. Then came the moment of decision. The shadow began to pulse in a steady rhythm, brighter and stronger than ever. It stretched toward her, reaching out as if offering a choice. Step closer, engage fully, and risk the unknown, or retreat and remain observers, limited in understanding. Mara could feel the weight of the choice in her chest. One wrong move, one misjudgment, and the entity's curiosity could turn into something dangerous. But she also felt the possibility of connection, of learning, of a future where humans could reach across the gap between their world and an intelligence far older and wiser than themselves. Mara stepped forward. Her hand moved slowly, projecting light pulses directly at the shadow. It responded immediately, folding and twisting to meet her patterns. She felt the energy surge through her, not violently, but like a flow of understanding, as if the entity was acknowledging her courage and willingness. Elias stood silently, observing, but Mara knew he trusted her judgment. The shadow pulsed once more, then paused. In that pause, Mara felt a strange clarity. The entity was not just testing them, it was inviting collaboration. It had learned from them, and now it offered knowledge in return. It wanted a relationship, a connection built on observation, understanding, and mutual respect. Mara exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and wonder. She realized that humanity's strength lay not just in technology or power, but in its ability to observe, reason, and reach out in understanding. The shadow began to recede, aligning again with Elias's form. But Mara noticed something new. A faint shimmer of energy remained in the air, a trace of the entity's presence, a promise that it would continue to interact, to guide, to communicate. It was a sign that humans were no longer invisible to it. Elias turned to Mara, a rare smile on his face. "You did well. That was remarkable." Mara nodded, still absorbing the enormity of the encounter. "It's incredible. I never imagined intelligence could exist like this. Not in matter, not in flesh. But here, it's alive in a way we can't even begin to define." "Yes," Elias said softly. "And now we know. We are witnesses. We are participants. And perhaps in time, we will learn how to communicate fully, to share knowledge, to grow together." Mara looked out over the plateau, watching the shadows stretch and pulse under the twin suns. The planet itself seemed to breathe, alive with energy and consciousness. She felt a profound sense of humility and wonder. Humanity had reached a threshold, a first step into understanding life that was beyond the human form. She turned back to Elias. "We have a responsibility now. We must document, study and learn carefully, and we must be ready for whatever comes next." Elias nodded. "Yes. But remember, Mara, the greatest lesson is patience. The entity is ancient, wiser than us. We must match its curiosity with respect. Only then can this bridge between us endure." Mara smiled faintly, feeling a sense of purpose she had never known. "I understand. And I'm ready." Over the next weeks, the outpost shifted into a new rhythm. Mara and Elias continued their observations, refining their communication methods. The shadow entity responded to their efforts, gradually introducing new patterns, teaching them subtle concepts about energy, consciousness, and perception. Every session was a lesson, a dialogue, a first step in understanding intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Other researchers noticed subtle changes as well, shadows moving slightly, energy readings fluctuating in patterns that suggested awareness. Mara documented everything meticulously, knowing that this knowledge would be humanity's first record of interaction with non-corporeal intelligence. One night, Mara stood alone on the plateau, watching the shadows twist and pulse beneath the twin moons. She felt the entity's presence clearly now, calm, observant, and almost gentle. It had tested, taught, and now it waited. She understood that this was not the end. It was the beginning. The shadow pulsed once, a soft, deliberate signal. Mara responded with her light projector, mirroring its movement. And in that silent exchange, she felt the bond form, a connection between humanity and something far older, wiser, and extraordinary. For the first time, she realized that courage, observation, and understanding were humanity's greatest strengths. Not weapons, not machines, not domination, but the ability to see, to think, to communicate, and to reach across the unknown. The planet was alive, the shadows were alive, and humanity had taken its first step into a relationship with a consciousness beyond comprehension. Mara smiled softly, feeling awe, humility, and hope. The universe was vast, mysterious, and full of life in forms humans could scarcely imagine. And now, thanks to observation, courage, and understanding, humans were part of that discovery. As she turned back toward the outpost, Mara knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. Humanity had reached out to the unknown, and the unknown had reached back. The shadows pulsed again, a quiet, steady rhythm, a heartbeat of consciousness, a promise, a greeting. And Mara, standing on the plateau of Arvion 6, understood. They were no longer alone.